Imagine, your alarm goes off and you trudge out of bed. You slowly get ready for the day, pack your backpack, trying to make sure you don't forget anything. You go to lecture. It's long and repetitive. It makes it hard to concentrate on what the professor's saying. You start clicking your pen to focus your attention. Your next stop is Chem Lab. As you're walking there with your friend, you reach into your backpack for your safety glasses, but you forgot them in your room. You dash to the dorms and back and end up being 5 minutes late. After lab, you have lunch and then 2 more lectures. You also had an advisor meeting, but it completely slipped your mind until after it was over. You frantically email your advisor to apologize and reschedule. After dinner, you have an SGA meeting before 2 hours of basketball practice. By the end of the day, you are exhausted. After practice, you make the trek to the science library with your teammate to do some work and feel a lot of pressure to get started. You have your to-do list ready and you know exactly what you have to do. But no matter how hard you try, you physically cannot get started. You spend a few hours in the library and only end up completing one of the tasks that you were supposed to. You eventually go home and get ready for bed to do all the same things tomorrow.
Now, for an individual with ADHD that was simply trying their best to get through their day, the world saw something else. To a professor, they appeared disinterested. To a classmate, their pen clicking was annoying. To a friend in chemistry, they were forgetful. To an advisor, they didn't care about their meeting. And to that teammate, they just seemed lazy. To understand why these behaviors are misinterpreted, we need to understand what actually underlies attention, which is where we are confronted with executive dysfunction. Executive dysfunction is a behavioral symptom that prevents an individual from being able to regulate the brain's management systems. It is often linked to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and it takes shape in many different ways, such as procrastination, forgetfulness, lack of organization, poor planning, and more. We are prompted to ask, what is really going on behind the scenes?
There are several different types of systems and regions of the brain that take part in executive functioning in ADHD. This includes the prefrontal cortex, which is heavily involved with executive function, and it's also involved in planning, focus, and impulse control. The basal ganglia are linked to habit formation, movement, and reward. The limbic system, which includes the amygdala, which is concerned with emotion, and the hippocampus, which is concerned with memory, are also involved. The anterior cingulate cortex, which is the ACC, is heavily involved with attention, motivation, and error detection, and there are also neurotransmitters involved like dopamine, which is involved with motivation and reward, and norepinephrine, which is involved with impulse control and attention. All of these factors help us to understand the biological basis behind executive functioning. Here we have some MRI scans of individuals with and without ADHD when they were performing a math calculation. This can show what regions of the brain light up concerning attention and information processing. In this study, it was found that individuals with ADHD had decreased activity in the frontal lobe, which we've learned is involved with attention and executive function processes. These scans show a physiological difference between the brains of those with and without ADHD. There are many studies evaluating the role of executive function specifically and how it impacts academic and social performance. Several studies have shown that there is a distinct difference in both academic and social functions for those with and without ADHD. We can remember back to our scenario of our student with ADHD. There was a study in younger students with ADHD and a study in college students. In both of these studies, the results showed that individuals who struggle with executive function had significant negative impacts on both school and peer functions.
And it doesn't stop there. In a professional setting, executive dysfunction could look like missing deadlines, a disorganized space, and a lack of focus in important meetings. One study found that adults with ADHD have higher levels of dysfunction compared to adults even with other psychological disorders such as anxiety, bipolar disorder, phobias, and personality disorders, especially in the examinations of academic, social, day-to-day, and criminal settings. This research can be trusted because their study included multiple control groups and factors that other executive dysfunction studies have not. Participants were administered separate tests based on their psychological disorder, and those without ADHD were tested for symptoms amongst the DSM-5 to ensure that there were no signs of ADHD that could have confounded with results. Overall, we saw even more of an indication of biological foundations for executive dysfunction when compared to other disorders. So now we are confronted with why we should care. Having ADHD and constantly receiving the negative assumption that you're just lazy can severely impact an individual's mental health and well-being. Having constant invalidation for a real biological-based impairment can lead to imposter syndrome and low self-esteem and self-worth.
In addition, encouraging the stigma around people with ADHD being lazy can lead to underdiagnosis at all stages of development, as individuals' symptoms could be brushed off as laziness. In a national stigma study for children, about a fifth of adults who had correctly identified an array of symptoms described in a vignette of a child as ADHD did not consider it a mental illness. And those who attributed the symptoms to bad character, poor discipline, or exposure to violent TV shows or video games were significantly more rejecting of the child in the vignette. This can result in less support for these individuals earlier on and much later diagnoses.
Understanding that people with ADHD have biological differences leading to executive function impairment can help reduce the stigma and better support and care for those who struggle with that aspect of life. It can help increase diagnoses as well, giving them the optimal amount of support as soon as possible. So let's go ahead and bring it all the way back to bring it to an end. An individual with ADHD is not lazy. They are trying their best. Their lack of focus is a biological attention deficit. Their pen clicking was stimulating. Their forgetfulness warrants forgiveness. Their procrastination is task paralysis. And this is a reminder that everyone benefits from just a bit more understanding and kindness. This has been a PSA.